when we were running the Future Forum work, we actually tracked every single quarter 10,000 people's preferences and what they were doing. After a couple of years, honestly, it got boring because the preferences fell out on the same distribution like continually.
Mhm.
There's about 15% of people that wanted something fully remote, about 20% that wanted full time in the office. Most people want some regular time together with their team that sits in the middle, where that time together might be once a month, might be once a quarter, might be 2 or 3 days a week. It depends on how your team is set up. The headlines for 5 freaking years now have been remote work is over, flexibility is doomed, we're heading back to the office, because the headlines get written about a CEO who's decided to make a change, to go back into the office, right? There's not a lot of headlines that get written about we didn't change our minds, because that's a boring headline. No one would ever read the story. If you look at the data underneath it, yes, it's gotten a lot noisier over the course of the past 6 months. Andy Jassy at Amazon, Jamie Dimon at JP Morgan, Donald Trump. But 68% of companies in the US have some sort of workplace flexibility. That's Flex Index. Flex Index tracks roughly 8,000 US based firms. That number didn't change last year. Like last year, Q2, Q3, Q4 numbers are all pretty much exactly the same. In fact, Q4 went from 67% flexibility to 68, like no change. If you look at Nick Bloom's data on percentage of people working from home or US Census data, Nick's phrase is flat as a pancake. Like we're at a point where about a quarter of all workers, meaning frontline and knowledge workers, work at home for at least a few days a week. And that hasn't changed much for the past couple of years either. There is a little bit of migration in the world, though, and that's more towards some sort of like, hey, 3 days a week is really the number and we really mean it. You're seeing that from more companies, and there's some shift towards that. It's not far off of what the average person wants, so it's not horrible. But I think what you're going to see is this battle between how far are people really willing to go on the 5-day-a-week return to office mantra, when the reality is for every CEO who does it, there's 2 others that look at that and go, cool, you do you, and I will pick off your top talent because I know that I can use this as an opportunity to cherry pick some people away from you.
Yeah, like the Atlassians of the world. I mean,
Exactly.
it sounds like that's exactly what they're doing.
Yeah, they've advertised it, right? Amazon
Yeah.
announces 5 days, and Atlassian comes out with something like a day later going, congrats. Here are literally, several hundred job openings. Anybody want to switch?
Yeah, I can't remember if it was, I think it was Roz Francis Harris, the VP of Talent Acquisition at Zillow. When we had her on the show, she walked us through the funnel metrics, like pre-COVID versus
Yeah,
post-COVID, where they went fully, I think they call it Cloud HQ,
yeah,
and like it wasn't even comparable. Like the
no,
amount of inbound that you get whenever you have a fully remote role or a flexible role just
yeah.
doesn't even compare.
Well, and this is the thing that a lot of CEOs miss is you've actually got real advantages, right? And some people do get this, which is I can attract talent from more locations. It's the reason why we changed it at Slack. We talked about it for years beforehand about standing up a remote team, right? But because we'd never done it before, we didn't trust that we could do it. We were 3 months into the pandemic, and Cal Henderson, our CTO, is the one that said, hey, I've changed my mind. We can now hire people that aren't just willing to move to San Francisco and New York and Melbourne and Dublin. I can hire people in a wider range of geographies, and that gives me access to more talent in more places. It's also a little bit cheaper. So why wouldn't I?